affect you in the immediate. You should not lose your job because of what has happened. Well, that's what the Bank of Ghana governor said today at the press conference. Plus, the Bank of Ghana governor announced today that the reason why these 5 banks have been dissolved and they will cease to exist, in fact, they have ceased to exist as of this moment, fundamentally because of liquidity challenges. And it details that, in fact, government has, as of today, issued a 5.7 billion cedi bond that will be used to keep the new bank that has been created, afloat. In the interim, government has given out 150 million cedis to assist the bank, the new bank that has been created, and deal with you as customers, transact, so you can go in tomorrow and transact business as usual. And the central bank governor also indicated today that this arrangement is a purchase and assumption arrangement. If you want to understand what this is, look no further than the Capital Bank UT Bank arrangement, which, of course, what we saw in that circumstance was the dissolution of the 2 banks, and those 2 banks were handed over to GCB to handle, and those 2 banks became part of GCB. The difference with this one is that these 5 banks will not be handed over to an existing bank. Their assets and deposits will not be handed to an existing bank. The central bank has created an entirely new entity to manage the affairs of the banks which has ceased to exist as of today. We'll be taking you to the Bank of Ghana shortly, where the press conference ended just about an hour ago, and getting further details on what has happened tonight as far as this unprecedented step taken by the central bank. George Yafi, who was at the press conference, will join us with a breakdown shortly. But I want to start by breaking this down for you a bit more. Let's speak to Professor Bokwing, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Hello, Prof. Thank you for your time on Top Story.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening to your cherished listeners.
I don't know if you listened to the governor today.
I couldn't get a chance because I was doing another presentation, but I got a release from our contacts, and I've gone through briefly. I've also listened to your initial comments and the introduction of the subject matter.
First of all, break this down for myself and my listeners. What does this mean in real terms?
Well, there's no need for us to panic in the immediate. If you have monitored the space, the financial space for some time now, you would have observed that this is coming, predictable to some extent. I'm also quite happy to the extent of the approach that the central bank has taken, more in terms of preserving jobs rather than allowing these banks to go under the water and consolidating them. But of course, it's the early days. Challenges of integrating all these banks into one umbrella and all of that. But I want to believe that they're going to get proper guidance and all of that. There shouldn't be the need for panic withdrawal from any of these banks, given the arrangement that has been made and all of that. So, and I think that I've had concerns about the piecemeal approach that the central bank has adopted for some time now. One bank, one press release, one bank, one statement. But I think it looks to me this is bringing a closure to these developments in the banking sector, so that we can have a unified fund, a much more robust banking system that can do big deals and support the overall government economic strategy. Going forward, I think that, well, in the immediate term, we may not see job cuts here and there, but I think we cannot ignore that totally. There wouldn't be the need to maintain branches that are so close to each other and all of that, because it will have an implication for efficiency and then performance of the consolidated bank. I'm also quite happy to the extent that there's some injection of liquidity in order to meet deposit withdrawal requests of depositors in the immediate going forward. And I think that beyond it, and we do know that we found ourselves in this situation because of the actions and inactions of the players, including the central bank, over the years, in terms of strengthening corporate governance practices of these banks, in terms of their own regulation, prudential returns, assessment, due diligence, and all of that. We don't need to find ourselves in this situation again. But I'm hoping that we are out of it, and then we can move forward.
Okay, Prof, I want you to stay on the line for me. For those of you just joining us here on Joy 99.7 FM, this is a major event by all standards. And what, in essence, has happened today will affect thousands, possibly millions of customers of these 5 banks. And we want to get you to understand what the central bank has announced today as far as these 5 banks are concerned. And that is why I want to bring you a brief playback of what the central bank governor, Mr. Addison, Dr. Addison, announced today at the press conference an hour ago, so that we'll all be on the same page. After that, Professor Bokbing and obviously, experts in this area will help us break this down a little more. Government has issued a 5.7 billion bond. Question: what will this bond be used for? Who will pay for this loan? Because a bond is essentially a loan. And also the question becomes: what happens to the owners, the managers, the shareholders, the board, the directors, whose decisions had led to, of course, what has happened today? We'll delve into that, but listen to the governor of the central bank.
The asset quality review of banks conducted by the Bank of Ghana in 2015 and updated in 2016 identified a few indigenous banks as vulnerable with inadequate capital, high levels of non-performing loans, and weak corporate governance. In August 2016, the bank closed 2 of those banks. This is the UT Bank and Capital Bank, and approved the acquisition by GCB Bank of some of their assets and liabilities under a purchase and assumption agreement. Other banks that were more recently licensed in 2016 and also commencing operations in 2017 also began showing signs of distress due to existing vulnerabilities that were not disclosed at the time of their licensing. Efforts by these banks to extricate themselves from financial difficulty have not borne fruit. The situation has rather worsened for these banks. Unibank and Royal Bank were identified during the AQR update exercise in 2016 to be significantly undercapitalized. The 2 banks subsequently submitted capital restoration plans to the Bank of Ghana. These plans, however, yielded no success in returning the banks to solvency and compliance with prudential requirements. The official administrator appointed for Unibank in March 2018 has found that the bank is beyond rehabilitation. Shareholders, related and connected parties had taken amounts totaling 3.7 billion cedis, which were neither granted through the normal credit delivery process nor reported as part of the bank's loan portfolio. In addition, amounts totaling 1.6 billion had been granted to shareholders, related and connected parties in the form of loans and advances without due process and in breach of relevant provisions of Act 930. Altogether, shareholders, related and connected parties of Unibank had taken out an amount of 5.3 billion cedis, constituting 75% of total assets of the bank. In the case of Royal Bank, an on-site examination conducted by the Bank of Ghana on 31st March 2018 revealed a number of irregularities. Its non-performing loans constituted 78.8% of loans granted, owing to poor credit risk and liquidity risk management controls. A number of the bank's transactions, totaling 161.9 million cedis, were entered into with shareholders, related and connected parties, structured to circumvent single obligor limits, conceal related party exposure limits, and overstate the capital position of the bank for the purpose of complying with the capital adequacy requirement. In the case of Sovereign Bank Limited, as part of Bank of Ghana's investigations into the failure of Capital Bank Limited, currently in receivership, it emerged that Sovereign Bank's license was obtained by false pretenses through the use of suspicious and non-existent capital. The bank is insolvent and unable to meet daily liquidity obligations falling due. Liquidity support granted so far to the bank amounts to 21 million as at 31st July 2018. The bank has not been able to publish its audited accounts for December 2017 in violation of Section 90 of Act 930. Beige Bank and Construction Bank were each granted provisional licenses in 2016 and launched in 2017. Subsequent investigations conducted by the Bank of Ghana revealed that, similar to the case of Sovereign Bank, both banks obtained their banking licenses under false pretenses using suspicious and non-existent capital, which has resulted in a situation in which their reported capital is inaccessible to them for their operations. Ladies and gentlemen, to support the government's twin objective of financial stability and strengthening indigenous banks, the Bank of Ghana is consolidating the good assets and liabilities of Unibank Ghana Limited, the Royal Bank Limited, the Beige Bank Limited, Sovereign Bank Limited, and the Construction Bank Limited to become the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited with immediate effect. The bank has approved Mr. Daniel Addo as the new Chief Executive of the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited. In addition, the government has appointed the following as the key management people to support in transitioning into the new established Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited. They are Mr. Simon Donu, who would be the Consolidated Bank Director in charge of Unibank, Mr. Alex Dodu, Consolidated Bank Director in charge of Royal, Ms. Kesua Brown, Consolidated Bank Director in charge of Construction Bank, Mr. Babatunde Ampa, Consolidated Bank Director in charge of Beige Bank, and Boulders Advisors Limited, led by Mr. Reggie France, as advisor to the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited. The Bank of Ghana has also appointed Mr. Nidodu Amano of KPMG as the receiver in respect of the bad loan assets of the 5 banks under Section 123 of the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions 2016, that is Act 930. The government of Ghana has recapitalized the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited to take on the selected good assets and all liabilities of these 5 banks. The government has also issued a bond of 5.76 billion cedis to cover the gap between the liabilities and good assets assumed by the Consolidated Bank. The Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited is expected to play a strategic role in the transformational agenda of the government. This provision is part of a fund set up by the government to help address all the legacy problems in the financial sector. Going forward, the Bank of Ghana will continue to strengthen its regulatory and supervisory framework and promote confidence in the financial system through the introduction of the Basel Regulatory Capital Requirements Directives, review of guidelines, directives, and regulations to the industry in line with the new Banks and Specialized Deposit Taking Institutions Act, that is the Act 930, rollout of the Basel II and III supervisory framework, and ensure
Still live here on Top Story on Joy 99.7 FM, and that is the governor of the central bank, Dr. Addison, they're addressing a press conference announcing a series of measures the government is taking affecting 5 banks. I still have with me Professor Bokping on the line with me, but I want to go straight now to my colleague Charles Ayite, who is at the Beige capital. Hello, Charles. Hello, Charles.
Hello, Evan.
Where are you exactly?
All right, so I'm currently at Beige Bank, the headquarters at East Legon, and we've been here for quite a while now. After the announcement by the Bank of Ghana, we could see some workers of Beige Bank on their way home. Actually, I interacted with one of them who spoke to me off record, and based on the import of his submission, you could sense that most of the workers there, based on his own assessment of the entire development, are not surprised as to what has happened today. According to him, speaking to me off record, they've been having a series of meetings regarding issues facing the bank and possible things that could happen in the future. They were just not sure what this entire thing was headed to until they had this development, this announcement by the central bank, by the governor of the Central Bank of Ghana. But just a few while ago, we also did see a vehicle with an escort, a police escort, enter into the headquarters of the bank. We're getting indications that these could be, this very vehicle could contain some officials from the Bank of Ghana. We don't know what exactly this meeting could be about, but we're suspecting it's all based on the transition process of all these 5 local banks having to now be under one main bank, which is the Consolidated Bank Limited, Ghana. So this is what we're picking from Beige Bank, actually. We visited early on the Sovereign Bank as well. Working activities was ongoing there normally. Nothing, weird or, off the cuff was happening at that very scene. Banking activities ongoing smoothly until the banking hours ended at 5 p.m. But it's very clear, most workers, especially at Beige Bank, are just not surprised. And if you see the atmosphere at Sovereign Bank as well, you could get an indication that, it's never hit them so hard. We should be expecting the implications of this announcement felt very hard tomorrow, especially when we're having clients and customers now hear the news right now on Evan.
So, Charles, you mentioned that there's a security detail that arrived?
Absolutely, at the head office of Beige. And we're suspecting, we're getting information that there could be officials of the Bank of Ghana meeting management of Beige Bank ahead of the transition process. So
they currently, from what you see, will be in a meeting right now at the headquarters of Beige?
Absolutely, Evan.
I'm wondering whether you got there before the banking hours.
No, we got there just a minute after the, a minute before the banking hours ended, just around 5 p.m. in that regard. And working activities on just not going on, workers on their way home, but just customers coming in, one in drips and drabs, just checking out the cash at the ATM here.
Charles, thank you very much with that update. I have Professor Godfred Bokping, Head of Finance Department at the University of Ghana, still with me on the line. Prof, we heard a bit more from the governor of the central bank, and there are a few fundamental questions I want to ask you your thoughts on. He indicates that the government has issued this 5.76 million cedi bond, billion cedi bond, to help these banks stay afloat. The question becomes, who paid for this loan?
Costs of bailouts oftentimes are not shared equitably. It has to be absorbed by the government some way, somehow. there could be a mechanism where the government could get the money back in terms of recollecting some of the non-performing loans, and also charging some of the people whose actions and inactions have brought about these issues, as well as the financial institutions themselves or concerned. It's something has to be done about that. I think it's also quite instructive, right, to note the central bank more or less admitting its own lapses in the granting of provisional license, in its own regulatory activity, supervision, and all of that, and also the actions and inactions, directors and senior management, and all of that. I think it hasn't been that good. I'm just hoping that now that we have identified these weaknesses, internal control weaknesses, corporate governance lapses, and all of that, we'll be able to strengthen the regulatory framework, improve on the corporate governance and its enforcement, so that we don't get ourselves into some of these things. But of course, we can't blame the central bank 100%. Even with better and improved regulation in a market-led economy like the U.S., the global financial crisis happened. We started from the subprime mortgage market. But of course, we also saw how the U.S., how they dealt with some of the how they dealt with some of the financial institutions as a way of also covering the bailouts that they also engineered.
And that is a fundamental point, is it not? Because last year in August, we saw the of course, Capital Bank, Unibank dissolved. And then, months on, government went in for, I think, a 2 billion CD loan, issued a 2 billion CD bond to try and deal with the challenges that, the directors and etc. had left, the mess they've created in essence. And we saw there was resistance from both minority and majority sides on the Finance Committee in Parliament that why should the taxpayer be burdened? Because once government takes these loans, eventually Mr. Bopping and myself will pay for it. And the question they're asking, they're raising is, why should we be burdened for the mess that these directors, shareholders had created? It appears we are repeating that same approach in the case of these 5 banks. And the question is, why isn't the Bank of Ghana? They didn't say anything today, for example, what is going to happen to the shareholder directors, etc., whose decisions led to this particular problem. What's your own thoughts on that?
Precisely. The central bank's own integrity is on the line. Their own ability to enforce the rules, regulations, and all of that, I think we live to see. But you see, purely, one can raise the question of who ultimately pays for this debt. But sometimes the considerations might not be just this. You may want to look at the overall good, the common good, job losses, implication for social protection spending, social vices, anxiety, the spillover, and all of that. And also the need to preserve local content in the banking industry. So when you put all these things together, sometimes the central bank may swallow the common sense in answering the question who ultimately pays, and we'll look at other considerations in coming out with this. Like I said, we know how the U.S., other countries sought to recover the bailout monies that they gave and all of that in restructuring and all of that. So they shouldn't end here. But of course, we'll give the central bank the benefit of the doubt. They have given indications of certain actions that they will take with respect to the board, the shareholders. And if you look at what the governor read, there were serious issues about withdrawals that were done perhaps off the balance sheet, of the vigilance of the central bank, withdrawals by shareholders, attempt to offset the regulatory burden, set aside a single obligor limit. I don't know whether they will need any other better and further evidence to be able to deal with some of these things as a way of sending the right signal that is good to be in business, but it is not optional to do the right thing and play with people's emotions, people's funds, and all of that. You see, if you look at banking penetration in this country, is very low. All these happenings are not good. in terms of roping in a lot of people in the banking industry and government's own overall objective of financial inclusion and all of that. But the reason I have some hope is the way the central bank in the last 1.5 years or 2 years or so has conducted itself. The confidence and then the diligence and perhaps the holistic approach that they have adopted. I wouldn't say they have arrived, but I think that that is quite good, and that would also send the right signal. I take delight in the fact that they are roping in Basel II and Basel III framework. I know some of the foreign banks have gone beyond the Basel I, Basel II that we haven't been even able to operationalize fully. And if we want to go straightly with the tenants and the requirements of the act that he quoted, then really there's the need to scale up the capacity of bank officials in terms of risk management, in terms of, and also corporate governance training and all of that, and the necessary certification in upgrading, including treasury dealings, treasury management, and the certification, the requirement, the minimum requirement that key players in the industry ought to have, and the continuous professional development that must be instituted to ensure that we have a banking sector, we have a financial sector that is robust enough to support and deliver consistent with the overall economic management strategy that government is putting in place.
I'm grateful, Professor Bokpin there. He is the head of finance at the University of Ghana. And just joining us on here on Joy 99.7 FM, this is Newsnight.